How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good.
I want to start by saying congratulations on the movie. It's just a tremendous film. And one of the things is, I'm just going to start with the way it was shot, which is you guys used, I believe, 16 millimeter, IMAX. Talk a little bit about the decisions on the format you wanted to shoot with, and you know, let's start with that.
Well, I mean, you know, Linus and I, right from the get-go, I think, talked about just how can we make it feel as immersive as possible? How can we make the audience feel like they're going on these journeys with Neil, and also with Neil's family. So we wanted to shoot it like a documentary. We wanted to shoot it in a very up-close and personal way. 16 millimeter was the format of choice for the astronauts in space in terms of their own coverage of their missions. So we modeled our look after that archival footage. And then when it came time to finally land on the moon at the end of the film, then I think we wanted to try to make that into a Wizard of Oz sort of moment where you can kind of get that lift and that sense of extremity from the tightest, smallest kind of claustrophobia you can imagine to this vast expanse, this cosmic sort of achievement. So going from 16 to IMAX felt like a fun kind of way to communicate that.
Yeah, and the reason for 16 mil is really to be, you know, emotionally connected with the characters. We felt the 16 mil is really beautiful, and that's a great thing with film formats, is that you can use these all various film formats for expressing different parts of the story, and the story is so wide in terms of dramatic scope, so that it was really fun with this project to go from the very, very intimate you know, photography with the characters to the wide space.
I was going to say, one of the things is when you want to do so many close-ups, because the film does have so many close-ups, do you get, like, you have an amazing track record, but does the studio ever look at the dailies and say, wow, that's a lot of close-ups?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were, look, I think we were really lucky to have a studio that backed a whole host of somewhat unconventional, you know, things that we wanted to try with this, not the least the idea of shooting a large portion of the movie on 16 to begin with. It's a lot. It's just a different sort of style than you usually would use in a big movie like this. But also, I think a lot of the approaches Josh took to his script, that Ryan took to his performance, that Ai-Ling took to the sound design of the movie. I think in every case, I think we wanted to try to do something a little different, you know, because there have been, of course, famous movies about this era and famous documentaries about this era, and the moon landing itself is, of course, the imagery of that is something we all grow up with and think about all the time. So we wanted to try to make sure to strip away the mythology, get at a different perspective on this, and make it feel like you had never seen it before.
Completely. I actually want to jump into the script real quick. Talk a little bit about what was it about the story and these characters that got you excited to, you know, want to tell this story. And also, I don't want to reveal anything, but you show some things in the movie that I didn't know. And what was it like learning some of these interesting new things for me?
Yeah, I think that was the hope, that hopefully we would show a lot of things that people didn't know. You know, I mean, the first attraction was, you know, I literally, Whiplash had just come out in Sundance, and I literally watched it on a DVD before it hit the theaters, and was just totally excited to work with this guy. Said, whatever mission he's on, I want to be on that mission. I didn't know much about Neil Armstrong, and you know, what I knew was sort of the bland iconography, which we all know. What amazed me was when I got into Jim Hansen's book, how much sacrifice, loss, and failure there was over the course of this 6-7 year span that really most people don't know about it at all. And it sort of, that dovetailed nicely with Damien's initial idea of showing how terrifying this really was and how dangerous it was. Well, there were real dangers and real losses, you know, in terms of life, in terms of some great heroes who we've forgotten, like Ed White and Elliot See and Gus Grissom. And so really detailing some of that, I felt like would expose a whole new edge to NASA and to the space program at the time, which would be very, in some ways, exciting in terms of when we look at things that we want to tackle in the future. I think it's good to know that it's hard, that it's ordinary people, ordinary men and women like Neil and Janet who are sacrificing a ton in order to get there.
One of the things that I'm always curious about is you're telling a very true story, but you're also making a movie. So talk a little bit about that line of, did you ever feel like, well, we're going to have to dramatize, like embellish a little bit, or is it always, it has to be accurate,
I mean, I think we wanted to, it depends on the style of movie, of course. With this movie, I think, again, going back to that documentary style, that real-time, immediate style we wanted to adopt, I think it was really important that it be as truly authentic as possible. That's why it was such a joy to work with someone like Josh, who is just goes into the research to an extent, and
you want to say anal here.
Right. OCD.
OCD.
Gets so
Obsessive.
OCD and obsessive about the research that nobody just grounds everything. And of course, I mean, we kept finding stuff in the research that was more sort of wild and shocking and emotional and informative than stuff we could have come up with anyway. And especially talking to people who lived these times, talking to Neil's sons, Rick and Mark, Neil's wife, Janet, talking to astronauts who flew with Neil, like Dave Scott and Mike Collins and Buzz Aldrin, and people at NASA at the time. We were really lucky to just have those doors open to us and be able to spend real quality time with these people, and often have them come to set, so we could just make sure that we got every, down to the nitty gritty, that we could try to get it as accurate as we could.
One of my first great mentors in writing was Lawrence O'Donnell Jr., who I wrote with on The West Wing, and he early on said to me, well, fact is always more interesting than fiction, than anything you can make up. And I think it's true. And that was sort of the general approach we took here. One thing that we've done, because we felt such responsibility, because I think we're shedding real new light on an American icon, is we've written a book, which is an annotated screenplay where we have great photos from the movie, which shows off the incredible work of Linus and Damien, but also it really goes into detail in terms of what's true, and more detail on what's true, but also what's not true, where we fictionalized and why we made those decisions. Because I think in a film like this, that's always a difficult axis, and I've written, this is my fourth film trying to work at that level, and so I just thought we should begin to have a conversation about these things as filmmakers. So I hope that book will help.
We definitely have to talk about the sound design because it's exceptional. It's so immersive. Talk a little bit about just the genesis of how you got involved in the project, and also just the challenges of trying to recreate all of these sounds. And I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, thanks for the compliments. I'm glad you like it. Well, I got involved in the film because I've worked with Damien on La La Land, and once he brought us back on to work on First Man, we started doing a lot of research and going through some NASA archives and stuff, and so some of the challenges, as you can see, are some of the cockpit scenes. In order to sell, the danger that the astronauts were going through, basically that in this fragile metal spacecraft. So we started gathering sounds, recording sounds for it, like the sound of the Saturn V. To sell, it was and still is the most powerful rocket in history, and it's hard to get period recordings from back then that are really good quality. So we just blacked out this past February. SpaceX launched that biggest rocket to date, Falcon Heavy, and that's the closest in size to it. So we managed to record it really close to get the ignition, the launch, the sonic booms for it that we used in the X-15 sequence.
Did SpaceX get a thank you in the credits?
They did. and plus, we also recorded a few other rockets, from ULA and some other rocket companies in the Mojave Desert. So, we have sounds of the thrusters, or also to feel the low-end energy, during the launches. We went to JPL and recorded, the acoustic test chambers where they used to test hardware to simulate an actual launch environment. So it's powered by nitrogen gas. and also, you know, down to like we wanted to try to sell some of the authenticity of it, and so yeah, so some of the helmet air that you hear in the movie were actually recordings of you know, the bubble helmet that like astronaut John Young wore for the Apollo 16 mission.
Which is the sound that you worked on till the very, very end that you were never happy with?
That that's a good question. Well, I don't know if I'm never really quite happy with, but it's always challenging. You know, it's during the Gemini spin. You know, because we have to sell like, you know, how out of control, and they were so close to like dying and losing it during the spin, and so we had to create like this loop for the spin, and that was a little challenging, and so yeah, so we had sounds that we used, like say like from train coupling and all that, but you know, we tried many different things, but Damien had a very specific idea, and so Justin Hurwitz came in to help also with recreating it with like some musical instruments that then I process it to distort it completely.
As if Ai-Ling's job wasn't hard enough, we brought in all sorts of our consultants to watch the film before picture lock. We brought in Frank Hughes and Joe Engel, the last X-15 living pilot. We brought in Rick and Mark Armstrong, Mike Collins. We had a ton of experts come in and watch the film and comment on everything from, you know, the Gemini is missing a nose, you know, a docking bar, which we had to put in, to the sound. And so we were getting it from all sides, you know, with like a month and 6 weeks left. Yeah. And so that's what, you know.
Yeah, one of them had a good point about for the Titan rocket, which launched the Gemini, that it makes this like unique Titan like sound during ignition, the chirp. It's almost like a whoop kind of sound. So we did some like research and archives and found some like newsreels of that with that sound in it. It's only unique to the Titan rocket. So so we had that in the movie too during ignition for the Gemini launch.
I'm curious about how much with the way you guys collaborate. Is it storyboards, like figuring everything out before you walk on set? How much is it, you know, figuring it out in the moment? And how did it change from La La Land to this? If at all.
It's a combination. I think Damien has very much an idea in his head and works out the story and the way of how he would like to shoot it. And in this case, we had to actually, Damien had to do storyboards for the entire, all the space, you know, travel, just because also Damien really wanted to make this film as realistic as possible, and therefore we wanted to shoot the whole film very realistic. So we didn't use any green screen, or we didn't use all the visual effects was created in pre-production in order for us to actually shoot imagery on huge LED screens that we projected on, and to do so we put crafts on gimbals and stuff that had us work very detailed about like what angles we're shooting, what day, and so on. So we had to. Damien did a very meticulous storyboard and previs of the space travel, really, and then we left more to the Earth sort of story to work out with actors, together with actors, how to tell the story.
I was just going to say I'm basically out of time already, so I'm just going to do. I know it went. It's crazy. My last thing for you, I always ask you this: how long was your first cut compared to the finished film?
First cut was this wasn't actually too out of control. It was about 2 hours and 35 minutes, and without credits. Finished film is 2 hours 15, I think, without credits.
That's actually really that's pretty tight.
Yeah, though I remember when Josh saw the first cut of me, he had a good point. He realized that we had actually, in order to get to that 2 hours and 35 minutes, we'd basically gutted the first act, and so we actually wound up restoring a lot of stuff while tightening other stuff. So it's always this kind of, that's kind of what I love about editing too. Is you never really know exactly where you're going to wind up, and you sort of are casting darts in the dark, and then you're finding your way through.
Yeah, that's also the final rewrite. So I listen. I have a million other questions, but you have to do what we call some premiere, or introduce, nothing important. So I'll just say that to be continued, because I have a million other questions. Before you go, I messed up at the beginning. The only reason I get to do these interviews is because of House of Aurora. I partnered up with them. They're the sponsor, and I want to give them a huge thank you. House of Aurora, thank you. Thank you all so much for coming in. Movie's fantastic.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.